Wow. All right. So this is the first episode that I've done by myself on video. So this is going to be a very unique experience. I promise I'll try my best to have engaging conversation or be somewhat entertaining as this episode goes on. But wow, some shit has changed since the last time I hopped behind this microphone. And that being like about a week ago. I basically made a podcast with my sister, told a mask fishing story, and then I decided to clip that and upload it to TikTok. Now, full disclosure, that clip that I took from the episode represents me as a way better storyteller than I am in actuality, because that shit in the fucking podcast was way overdrawn. It was probably like a 30-minute segment, if I'm being honest. And in the podcast, it ended up being, or in the podcast, it was a 30-minute segment. And in the TikTok clip, it ended up being 3 minutes long. So I cut that up into like a minute segment each and posted a part 1, 2, and 3. Somehow, some way, the algorithm decided to bless me that day because it gave me about, I think right now it's at like 500,000 views for the first part. Second part is at 470,000 views. And the third part is at 500 plus thousand views. So totaling over close to 1.5 million views along those three videos with a couple thousand likes. And I got a following. I was at 788 followers on TikTok before I posted that clip. After, now I'm somewhere close to like 4,100. So thank you guys so much for following. If you are one of the individuals that followed, if you found me because of that mass fishing story, hopefully there's many more stories to entertain you to come. And yeah, this is just going to be an interesting journey growing this community. I look forward to it. I post content every Monday, like I said, on this podcast, Chatted Less with Chung. Today's episode is going to be a little different, right? We're going to try to dive into some of my insight. I'll say insight in quotes because I don't really know how much insight I have. Just my thoughts on some things that I'm passionate about, that being video games and Marvel. And yeah, I have some stuff written down over here, but we'll see. This is always like a loose form content show, so there's not too much structure to it right now. But yeah, this is going to be by myself. If you don't like that, sorry, find another episode. Next Monday, we will have a guest on. It's looking like it's going to be my mom or my friend Vishal, who was on the very first video episode podcast, episode 18. So yeah, that's going to be good. That's some plans. Once again, thank you guys so much for subscribing, because also on YouTube now I have close to 60 subscribers on YouTube. So thank you so much for subscribing. Hopefully I can entertain and you could just put this in the background while you're cleaning or doing some shit. If this content makes one person entertained or happy, or I make one of you guys laugh, I mean, I know that a lot of content creators and a lot of people say that shit all the time, but I'm glad if it does that for one of you guys. I'm just trying to pursue this passion of mine. So yeah. So today's episode, this is going to be a doozy because I got some shit to spew on, well, actually on Marvel. This is going to be the first time that I shit talk Marvel, and then I'm going to praise it. I'm going to go over two movies, the Eternals. You know, let me just get straight away into it. So let's talk about the Eternals. I obviously did not go to see it in theaters because I would have talked about it already at this point in the podcast had I did. I waited for it to come out on Disney Plus because I think it got somewhere in the 70s for a Rotten Tomato score, which is, that's not ass, but it's not like normal Marvel standards, right? Normally Marvel movies score in like mid 80s, and then the really good ones score like, low 90s, even up to like, mid 90s if it's like a fucking outstanding Marvel movie. But yeah, this one was disappointing to say the least, and it scored somewhere in the mid 70s. I can't remember what the exact score was. I want to say 74, but I'm not entirely certain on that. We'll see if one of you guys fact checks me in the comments. But yeah, The Eternals. Wow, that movie, I would say that movie was like a 5.5 at best. Visuals were dope, obviously, because it's a Marvel like movie, so production value is through the fucking roof. So the all the wow, I can't think of the CGI, right, is going to be amazing. All the CGI is going to be amazing just because the production's through the roof. Action sequences it wasn't anything special, right? It's not like, I mean, I guess it's hard to do because they're fighting, like beasts, like fictional, like, animal-like creatures. So it's not really too much of hand-to-hand combat. It's more of just like like people flying into things and a lot of like throwing of objects or like I don't know. It's not. It wasn't the best action. It was alright. But this is my real gripe with that movie. So obviously, Marvel has started itself. The foundations of Marvel is rooted in like reality. So it introduced us into the world of comics and Marvel, both of which I'm a huge fan of, by the way. So this isn't like me shitting on Marvel. It's more of just as a fan, my thoughts on this movie, right? So Marvel opened us up to the world of Marvel through Iron Man, right? So obviously that's a little more realistic. I mean, not too realistic, but not hyper realistic, but more realistic and grounded in reality than something like the Eternals. Conceptually, you have a guy who's really rich, which there's a lot of those people in this world, who could like make awesome shit, and he's a super tech genius and just makes a suit and then goes through like a whole redemption story arc, whatever, yada yada yada. You guys have seen the movie, hopefully you haven't. If you haven't, you're missing out, but whatever. So that is more realistic because that is someone like we can conceive what that is, right? The Eternals has a harder job because it's introducing us to, you know, it's introducing us into beings in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that are like outside of the scope of like reality. I mean, literally these like cosmic entities that just, you know, transcend all normal rules that apply to like most life that we know, right? So obviously doing that is going to be really difficult, especially doing it well. So obviously this movie had big shoes to fill. And it's tough to do that when you're, you know, trying to live up to the reputation of the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is insanely well written out. I mean, obviously you had the Infinity Saga, which is like just a crazy amount of movies leading up to this grand event. So it's really hard to keep up to and live up to that hype and then talk about something as big as this. So that being said, my biggest gripe with the movie was really the pacing and the sequencing of it. The actual material in the movie, I think, was not that bad. The way they showed the Celestials was, you know, it wasn't horrible. The way they, you know, basically there was like a little bit of a twist. I don't want to, you know, actually it doesn't matter because it's on Disney Plus, so you could watch it anyway. So I'm not spoiling shit, but basically it's like, oh, all of humanity is gonna die, and the Eternals ended up like having a mission that was falsely represented to them, and their purpose was not what they initially believed it to be. So that's cool. Whatever, you want to throw in a little narrative twist, fine. I get all that shit. But the issue for me was like random flashbacks throughout the movie. They promote it like you think Salma Hayek is going to be in the movie because she was like one of like the headlining actors or actresses in the film. So you think she's going to be in it and like a main character, but she's not. She's first of all, she starts off dead, right? And then you kind of have to piece together like what the fuck happened to her, which is not really that hard to see coming because Icarus as a character is just like, he's like a Boy Scout extreme, basically. He's like, oh, he has identity crises, whatever. We've seen that happen in millions of movies. But my issue with it is I don't understand why they chose to like randomly throw in scenes flashing back to like their times in ancient civilizations. I get, like, don't get me wrong, I think it's dope when you see like the explanation for certain things within like the scope of a story. So for example, like they kind of mentioned how, I can't remember his name because I mean these characters don't really mean much to me, but it was, I think it's like the first, this is bad that I don't remember his name, and he is the first homosexual character, confirmed homosexual character in the MCU. It was a black guy. I can't remember his name. It's like his power is like super techie, whatever the fuck. He's an eternal version of Tony Stark. That dude, right? He was responsible in part for the nuclear bomb that ended up wiping out all of like those two like in World War II. Nagasaki, I think it was, that was shown in the film. So obviously like that's awesome because it's kind of like offering like a little like sneak inside peek as to like how the Eternals have always been there, and it ties into like actual real life historical events. So that's pretty cool to see. That's not my problem. My problem is that when you're pacing along in the narrative that they present to you, and all of a sudden they just throw you back and they thrust you way back in time to like ancient Mesopotamia, where you're like, what the fuck is going on? Because I was just watching them in modern day trying to solve this crisis that's going on, right? And get to the bottom of like their thousands of years that they've been here. And like all of a sudden they're having like this like misrepresentation of their mission and they don't know what they're doing. I'm following along that story arc, and then they just want to chop it, cut it off short, throw you way back in time to show you a really kind of like useless inside look as to like how like the dynamic between all these characters work in terms of like a family sense. I think it would have been smarter. I mean, this is just me, my opinion, but I think it would have been smarter to start us off like the movie started off in ancient times before human civilization really even like got its like grip and foundation and where the real building blocks of society started. You throw us there and then show us the highlights progressing up to modern day events. So that way you give us time to appreciate and attach ourselves as the audience to these characters who are already like pretty non-relatable because they're fucking basically sentient like androids who are given godlike powers. So already that's like they're not human, so you're kind of like not really like attaching yourself to them. They're not relatable, right? So if you go and start us off in the beginning, give us some time to see how their relationship dynamics play out and how they work, which like, you know, who loves each other, who doesn't, all that shit, fine. We could kind of grip ourselves onto these characters a little bit more as an audience, right? That's at least my thinking. But they didn't do that. They put us in the beginning. You got to see a little bit, and then all of a sudden you're in modern day. And you're like, what the fuck happened in between then? And then it kind of goes throughout the movie, and you see all of a sudden this really crazy story arc happen where like these, I can't remember what their names are, Dementors. I don't remember because it's not that important. It wasn't that gripping, but these beings come back. So they're like here, and now it's like this big issue that's like keeps growing and expanding in terms of like the calamity, like it's a worldwide event that's gonna like destructive, right? I can't really speak right now. I don't know why. It's gonna be like a worldwide catastrophic event is what I was trying to say. So like the scope of this issue just bubbles up and it's like this massive thing, right? Cool, fine, I get that. But the issue is you don't get to attach yourself to these characters. You then thrown into this giant world-ending issue, and then while you're following along this worldwide issue, world-ending issue, they just throw you back to try to give you snippets and like completely mess with your like ability to kind of be in sync with these characters, at least in my perspective of things, right? So it throws off like your emotional investment and ties for these characters in the Eternals. That's my perspective on it, because like also my biggest thing is like you kind of see that Icarus and her name I think was Cersei and Icarus, you see them have like a romance from the beginning. Fine, cool. That is the only couple that really has like grounding, because I think the girl who's like super fast is in love with Drew, what's his name? The dude that could like control people's minds. Cool, right? Cool, fine. But they kind of just throw it at you in like the last third of the movie, so you don't really have any like, you're like, what the fuck? First of all, that girl who was super fast, she was probably my favorite character. She has a disability, she can't speak, right? So that's awesome. They could have done a little more with that, but they didn't. Half of the movie, she wasn't even in it. You just see her in the beginning, run around super fast, and then they throw her in at the end, and where has she been the whole time? She's been chilling in the fucking ship, which, by the way, is underground, under dust, and you see, like, all these ancient, like, relics around her. Where the fuck has she been running in and out, getting in there without anybody noticing? Because when they got there was archaeologists on site. I don't know. That's a little hard to believe. Fine. I just kind of let that one slide. But my personal gripe is the fact that they didn't include her in the rest of the movie. So she's just kind of like not there. And then at the end, you expect us to emotionally invest in a character that's not present for the majority of the film, in a relationship that character has with another one who's like a douche and just likes to like control humans. Like, what the... It's a little fucking strange. I don't know. That's like my issue with, you know, the Eternals. I would give it a 5.5 at best, right? Like, I think it's a super subpar Marvel movie. 5 is obviously average, so I think it's an average movie. I don't think it was... Maybe I think it's a 5 flat, honestly, because I could see it going below average, and I could see it being, depending on the person, being like, oh, it was great. For me, it was like right down the middle. I'll just give it a 5. It wasn't my favorite. It was actually probably the worst Marvel movie. Marvel movie, but in terms of it being a movie, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't painstaking to get through. It was somewhat entertaining. It's a fine movie to have on in the background when you like half pay attention, so you could just see like cool scenes of like Icarus flying or the final fight scene or whatever the fuck. So that's fine. But now we get into a movie that I fucking loved. So this is the praising portion of Marvel. That is Spider-Man No Way Home. Obviously, half the fucking world has seen this movie already. Half the world already knows what the hell happened in it because that shit was dope as fuck. That shit had me tweaking out in theaters. That was the first movie I think I remember sitting in the audience, watching it and being like actually making noises and like audibly reacting to this fucking amazing movie, right? I was sitting there, I saw it with my sister in theaters, and we happened to see it on the Sunday of that opening weekend. Excuse me, I had to take a little bit of a sip of water. So that Sunday of the opening weekend, and of course, you know, because people are assholes, they want to spoil things online. So one thing was spoiled for me. But I already suspected it, and that was that Tobey Maguire was in the movie, and Andrew Garfield obviously was in the movie. Because when I looked up Spider-Man No Way Home to try to book a ticket online, the first thing that fucking pops up for some reason, Google shows me, and it wasn't even a person. That's the fucked up thing. It was Google. Google spoiled that for me because they decided to put the cast on like a Saturday night. It comes up, the cast under it, and of course, who's like the third person from Tom Holland? It's like Tom Holland, Zendaya, and then, well, I guess for you guys it's this way. Tom Holland is the first little bubble, then Zendaya, and then fucking Tobey Maguire. I'm like, fuck, it's confirmed. Now it's ruined for me because I'm not gonna, like, I knew it was coming. I had a sense, like, you know, like you just knew, like they were gonna bless us Spider-Man fans with this shit from day one. We already knew, right? Well, really, since Into the Spider-Verse was so popular, so we already knew that shit was gonna happen. But for them to confirm it, for Google to do me dirty like that, oh no, I think I'm gonna have to call up Alphabet headquarters and give them a little piece of my mind, or write a strongly worded email because that shit was fucked up. Anyways, so I sit in the theaters, we're watching this thing. First half of the movie's great, but then once they're introduced, that's when all shit fucking broke loose. Like there's only one downside. I already got into this when I was talking to it with my sister, but there's one downside into watching a movie like this. It blows people's fucking socks off to the extent where you can't hear some of the dialogue in the movie. Like, we're sitting there, Andrew Garfield comes in, and everybody's like, ah! They're freaking the fuck out, as they should. Cool, I get that. But then they're like screaming so loud and so long that Ned was saying something to Zendaya's character. I should just say, like, you know, whatever. Ned was saying something to MJ, and I couldn't hear what the fuck he was saying because the rest of the audience was going crazy. So obviously that takes away from the experience a little bit, but I don't want to be bitching and moaning here. Like, I love the movie. It was a fantastic movie. Would I go to see it again with audience in theaters? 100%, because that also kind of adds to like the grandness of it all. Like, seeing all that happen was just like crazy, and I don't think I'm gonna forget it for quite some time. That was probably the best experience I've had in theaters. And the scene that gave me chills was when the three of them jump off the Statue of Liberty. And I think it's Tom Holland's Spider-Man. They're like webbing and swinging. He turns around, webs the two of them. They catch it, and then he spins and like throws them. I was like, ugh! When I saw that, I was like, I literally, my sister sitting to the right of me, you would have thought I was in MMA. I was throwing bows. I'm like, yo, what the fuck? Did you see that? I was throwing bows. Like, she probably got a couple bruises because I was geeking the fuck out. She was like, oh, she couldn't believe it either. And the whole theater obviously is like freaking the fuck out. So that was insane. That was a wild ride of a movie that I don't think I'm ever going to forget for like the longest time, because as a Spider-Man fan, like, you just get, like, I was a kid when I saw Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and I'm known within my friend group, right, to not be, it's not that I'm a Tobey Maguire hater. I just think those movies are not as good. They don't hold up as well as we think they do because we were kids when we saw them. So obviously when you're a little kid and your breath smells like Similac and you're sitting in theaters and you're seeing all this shit happen, you're freaking out. You're like, I've never seen this before. This is insane. Cool, whatever. So it leaves that like impact on you. But now when you're an adult, if you go to back to watch it, I do think they're not as good objectively from, you know, Marvel's Spider-Man, which is obvious, right? Like it's the legit like MCU's Spider-Man. So obviously they're going to invest a lot more time in making sure that is done to the best of their abilities. So that makes sense. All I'm saying is that Tobey Maguire, don't hate on him. I don't hate him as Spider-Man. I just don't think he's the best one. And Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, this movie did change my opinions on that, because I always thought Tom was the best, then Tobey, and then Andrew. But after seeing this shit, I don't know. Like, Andy was right about this. Andy always thought that Andrew Garfield was a good Spider-Man, but the movie was bad. Like, the movie didn't allow him to shine as the Spider-Man that he was. And you see this all, I'm like the fucking probably millionth person online saying this, like on record online saying this. I'm just openly admitting that I was wrong. I do think Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is on par with Tom. I don't know who I like better, and it's kind of like throwing me off because I knew from Civil War, Tom was already put on a pedestal for me because he just captured that like kid energy, that youthfulness that you see in Spider-Man's character. But then Andrew, now in this movie, like he has that wit and that like relatability, which is so crazy. And like now I don't know which one I want to choose for who I think is the best one. I think at this point, I'm not even going to try to debate or like process who's the best one. I think I'm just going to sit down, shut up, and enjoy all the fucking movies because now they're all Spider-Man. It's confirmed in the MCU that they're all Spider-Men in their respective Spider-Verse. So honestly, like I'm chilling. If I get all three of them, I'm perfectly fine. There is one thing. Now, this is like in direct contradiction with what I just said. I think as far as like the movie goes, it would have had a lot more emotional toll. Don't get me wrong. Like Aunt May dying was like pretty fucking insane. I did cry during that, like a little biatch, because I love Aunt May. Who doesn't? She's Peter Parker's like heart and soul. One of the characters that like really informs how Peter behaves and navigates through the world, right? And you see that in this movie. So when she dies, it's obviously a really big emotional like toll. But I think if Tobey would have died, that would have hit hard as fuck. Like to see the first Spider-Man, like, well, I guess chronologically not the first because it was like that Japanese Spider-Man, but the first like real like big screen Peter Parker die. The kid that the guy that you saw as a kid don the suit, die in that movie. I don't know. I think that would have just really fucked with everybody's head. But I know why they didn't do it. You saw like articles written from inside, like, you know, producer reports or whatever, screenwriting. Like the writers of that movie, they didn't kill him off. I think he was supposed to die, but they decided not to in case Tobey wanted to come back. Which is funny because I get the sense that Tobey doesn't really like being Spider-Man, which is interesting. I don't know if that's true. I think it's just because he's memed as like a paparazzi fucking hater. So seeing that online all the time, I think he's like, this is cool. Like, I'll do it for the fans, but he doesn't really want to be there. Andrew Garfield is the person that wants to be there and got a chance to redeem himself. And then Tom Holland is the current mantle. And I think he wants to be there too, obviously. Even though he's on record saying that he wants to start a family. So hopefully that doesn't collide with the Marvel movies going forward. Because I need to see that motherfucker wear the classic suit that was at the end. That shit was crazy. And I think the writing, the way they kind of made it so that he makes the ultimate sacrifice and you get a hard restart on the MCU 616 universe be how it is in the comics where no one knows who Peter Parker is in terms of being Spider-Man. I think the way they figured it out and made it so that everyone knew, it made this, like, I think the writing of it was just great. If you get what I'm saying. Like, they really found loopholes to try to make all this shit work, and I think it worked great. And I was just sitting in theaters, and that movie is easily in my top 3. I would say top 2 Marvel movies of all time. Like, proper MCU movies, it's in the top 2 for sure. I think for a movie in general, I think that movie is in like easily my top 7. Just because it's like that's my favorite comic book character, and the scope of it all it's fucking crazy. The only reason I don't say it's like easily number 1 is because you can't forget, like, it's hard because when you're caught up in the moment, obviously you're just gonna be like, that's the best fucking movie of all time. But I don't want to make that mistake because Endgame and Infinity War did something that no other movie's ever done, And the scope of that was like you can't fathom that, right? So now everything that they do is going to be topping that, obviously. But that, when it first came out, for its time, I don't know if you could beat that. Like, that's pretty fucking crazy. So that's why No Way Home doesn't just automatically take my number one spot. Let me know if you agree or disagree. If you guys liked it in the comments, like, please engage, interact with me. I try to respond to as many comments as I can. Yeah, and now that I have like 58 subscribers on YouTube, that'd be dope. And on TikTok, I don't know what clip I'm going to take from this episode, if I even take one, because I'm by myself, all by my lonesome today. So I don't know if I'm all that entertaining. But yeah, now to get into more complaining, I want to talk about the video game. So this is the cool thing, right? I talked to Mike. If you did watch that episode, I think it was episode 19. No, episode 20 with Mike. Excuse me. The fucking esophagus is getting a little dry because I'm fucking talking and chatting away. But in that episode with Mike, I alluded to starting like a sub series, like a mini series within Chadlas with Chung, under the CWC like umbrella, being like dedicated to video games. And I think if I had to name that would be called Game Chat or Party Chat. For you gamers out there, you obviously know why. And for those of you who don't, it's because that's what is the name of like when you're playing games and you're communicating with your friends who are playing with you on multiplayer games. That's what it's called: Game Chat, Party Chat, whatever. So I think it's like a cool little nod to obviously like gamers, and that's gonna obviously reference the subject matter, like the source material that we're gonna be covering on that little mini series. I don't know if I'm overextending myself. I think just in terms of content, it's hard to, especially during COVID, to get all these different people on here. I'm obviously not Joe Rogan, so I can't get celebrities. Not that I would want to, or like my friends are also busy, right? Like they have their own lives and stuff, so I can't just rely on them for content. They've graced me with their presence on the casting couch, to kind of just talk and like go over, random stuff. So I can't always just rely on them and for them to just drop everything at like the drop of a hat and just come and spend close to 3 hours on some episodes just talking about random shit. So just in terms of like content, I think the ability for me to just sit down and have an open discussion about my thoughts on like video games and like what's going on and like what I've been feeling in terms of like certain releases and stuff like that is great source of content that some of you guys might find interesting. I don't know if you do. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and if you think I should do it and start that little sub series. So now to get into that, I guess this is like a hybrid episode, or if I'm being honest, more of a filler episode. But yeah, I just want to stick to it and kind of get used to the idea of speaking to the camera and stuff like that, because it is a learning curve and whatever. Anyways, so when it comes to the video game portion of this episode, I want to go over a couple things. So I have a gripe to pick with the industry. Today's industry, but I'll get to that in a second. First, I want to go over like my thoughts on the new Warzone map, because the new Warzone map is it's surprising to say the least. I think it did a really great job of like giving a refreshing take and giving like it was like a breath of fresh air for Warzone players, because Verdansk was amazing, but it got stale after a little bit. Rebirth is awesome. I love Rebirth. Now with Caldera, I believe it's called, obviously they released it, and I'm pretty sure it's much bigger than the original Verdansk map, like by a lot. The only problem that I have with it is that, so from a bugginess standpoint, obviously Activision isn't the greatest at releasing like new updates. There's always going to be something broken in the fucking game. Like a gun is going to be way overpowered, or I don't know, like there's always something that's going to go awry, right, when they release an update. But for this one, I had two issues with this map. All right, I'm going to get into what I didn't like and then what I did like, just for a structure standpoint. What I didn't like is the fact that they pushed a secret agenda with this, and that was that they wanted you to purchase Vanguard, obviously, so the Call of Duty franchise makes more money, so you can level up Vanguard weapons, because they purposely made Vanguard weapons so fucking overpowered, like to the point where it's not fun, because all of those weapons that you have, like me, I don't have Vanguard, right? I have Modern Warfare. So I don't have those Vanguard guns, and they put you in a position where it's like You want to be good at the game? You want to stand a chance with like the rest of these people? You got to fucking buy Vanguard and you got to level up the guns for you to even have a competitive chance. A shot in the fucking dark to like go up against Jimmy from, I don't know, Omaha or Nebraska or some random fucking place in the country. In order to go against that little freaking 13-year-old, you got to have a gun that is leveled up through playing Vanguard. Because if you use that little pea shooter of a Modern Warfare gun against something like when it first came out, like the STG, you're going to get pulverized. You're going to get fucking blown to smithereens. You can't do shit, right? Because somehow they added in a new perk. It's like, you can't, oh yeah, you wanted to use your guns before, you're not going to stand a chance in an open firefight, because unless that person has Bun's accuracy, because his gun is just undoubtedly, undeniably better than yours. Oh, you want to go and hide in a corner, or you want to see cover? If they hit you once, we added in a new perk where it kind of highlights you and they could shoot you through fucking tents and walls and shit. So like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? You're pinholed basically. I don't even know if that's the proper expression, but you're put in a corner where you have to take certain actions, and it's like, what the fuck? Like, I don't want to buy Vanguard just to play Warzone. So I didn't, because I'm a stubborn mule, and I just went into Rebirth and grinded it out through that, which is so ridiculous, because I'm pretty sure the pacing of you leveling up your guns in that way is not nearly as effective as if you just get Vanguard. And then Activision was like, they gave you like a subtle like, yeah, like we know we have this agenda that we're pushing on you, so you know we'll make it not as bad. And Rebirth, which we know that all of you guys are playing this mode to level up your Vanguard guns, we'll give you double weapons XP. That'll be our consolation prize. And you're just like, what the like? Why do this to begin with? Why not just make the game not broken, where it's balanced and it like caters to different playing styles? Obviously, I know from like a game developing standpoint that's super difficult to do, because you don't want to make any one gaming play style overpowering and difficult to like, you know, go up against like too much. Even though the map did kind of do that, because this is the thing about Caldera, is that it's very open and very, very, very vast. So the sheer size and scope of like gunfights that you get into now, like in Verdansk, there was a lot of close quarter engagements, right? So it would behoove you as a player to, as from a strategic standpoint, if you're running solos or if you're in a squad, most of the time you'll be really well off with just an assault rifle and then a submachine gun for close quarters, right? An assault rifle for medium to long range distance, submachine gun obviously for close to like close medium. Fine, cool. In this game, in this map, it's completely shifted, where now the best, it almost seems like the best loadout to have in most cases in the map is going to be a sniper rifle and an assault rifle, because very rarely do you get into like very like tight corners. Like there's no like downtown really. I mean, there are like populated areas with a lot of buildings in Caldera, but a lot of the map is just like hilly firefights, which I love because it's like different, right? But at the same time, it's like that shift definitely took getting used to. So my biggest gripe with the game, just to summarize, or that update, is bugginess. Obviously shit went wrong, and like for the fact that I have a PS5 and I crash, like I'm playing with my boys, with Mike, with Vishal, with Andy, and all of a sudden the game fucking crashes in the middle of a game. Or get like this one, I know for a fact a lot of you guys, if you play the fucking game, you're gonna relate to this. You go up to a buy station, you hit whatever button it is to interact. I think it's E on the PC or like square on a PS4 or 5. You freeze for like 3 seconds. And in that time, you don't know, somebody could just run up on you and just light your ass up. So now you're like, what the, like, that's kind of bullshit, right? Like, no one likes that. So that's a common mistake that they still haven't patched from the last update. I played the game like, I want to say 3 days ago from the recording of this podcast, right? 3 days ago. And the Caldera's already been out for, I think, close to a month now. So, or maybe like 3 weeks, something like that. But they still haven't fixed it. Like, how is that not a number one priority? You want players to be on your gaming. It's a really big discouraging factor if like you try to play the game and it shuts down on you and just says fuck you and crashes every like, I don't know, 3 games. It's kind of ridiculous. So, and it's on a PS5. Like, that's what I don't get. Like, I would get if it was like, because, I mean, I don't know too much about tech, but maybe it's like your PS4 hardware can't keep up with like the demand for, you know, the generation of like, you know, depth and range within the map because it's so big and like there's too much detail. Fine, it crashes because of that. I get it. But it's on a PS5. It's on like one of the newest consoles. So Why is that happening? I don't fucking know. Maybe one of you guys know. Please explain it. Educate me, because I'm a dumbass motherfucker. I don't know shit about technology. If Andy were here, I would ask him, because he's a whiz when it comes to this stuff. So yeah, that's what I don't like about it. What I do like about it, I kind of touched on that, was the fact that they completely changed the dynamic, and they kind of made all players re-strategize and reconsider certain things. And now it's like a lot more valuable to be a really good sniper, and submachine guns aren't really that good anymore. Even though the MP40 is like super overpowered, but that's, game specific. I don't want to corner myself too much in terms of the audience here. So now to get on to the last segment of the episode. Today's episode is going to be a little shorter, so I apologize in advance. But to get on to the last portion of the episode, I wanted to talk about really briefly the fact that the gaming industry right now, as I see it today, has gotten a little too comfortable with releasing half-baked or half-completed bodies of work. I think that's a really big problem. I think that's a really big problem. I sound like a politician right now, but basically what I'm trying to say is, like, I fucking love video games, right? A lot of you guys love video games. You just want to play, right? And you play a game, then you see a trailer for another game that you're super excited about, and you're like, you can't wait. Like, the anticipation, it's like I feel like a little kid every time when I see a trailer for a video game that I'm super excited or interested in, and you're like, holy shit, I can't wait for that fucking game to come out. And then they release it, and it's like, well, that was such a disappointment. And you spend $60, right? Which is not like, it's not change. It's a decent chunk of money. And you're spending it on something that the fucking developer didn't even finish, right? And what makes me say this? All right, what experience is behind me saying all this? It's the fact that I got a PS5 because I wanted to play the newer games. I wanted to play the games that really push the boundaries in terms of technological capabilities, graphics, all that stuff. I revamped my gaming setup completely. I used to play, for all you really serious gamers out there, like Andy's gonna fucking, this shit will make his eyes turn. But I was playing on a TV that's maximum quality, I think was 720p. It was HD, but it wasn't like, it didn't have high dynamic range or all that shit that now like all these monitors and everything boast about. Like, I didn't have any of that. The refresh rate was god awful. This was a flat screen TV, and again, I don't want to sound like, this is gonna sound privileged. So if you go and comment that, obviously you're a fucking idiot, because we're talking about like something like, we're privileged to even have video games to begin with. But the TV that I was playing with was from like 2012. The flat screen that I was playing with was from 2012. So obviously technology for that shit has gone way through the roof. Like, it's improved significantly since then, right? And I was playing on that TV with a PS4 that was mounted to my wall, and I was sitting on my bed. Now, I loved it. I wouldn't trade it, right? But then I got a job, you make a little bit of money, and you're like, well, you know what? I'm still living at home with my parents, obviously. So why not invest in something I love, a passion of mine? So, and I also had to do it for my office. It was dual purpose, the monitor. So my boy Andy, shout out to you, Andy, hooks me up with a dope ass, not like gives it to me, but gives me great insight into the best gaming monitor. So it's an LG yada 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 something. It's like a really amazing gaming monitor. Has all those capabilities, has a gaming mode. The refresh rate is super high. Everything is crisp, clean, and like it helps performance, because like obviously refresh rate is super important. And I got a PS5 because I've been wanting to get a PS5, and I'm a Sony, stan. So I've been on the PlayStation wave since the beginning of my gaming experience. I wasn't on it when like the Sega Dreamcast came out, which I think was kind of like the precursor, but whatever. It was the PS1 I didn't have, the PS2 I did have, then I had the PS3, PS4 obviously, and then now the PS5. So I've gone through 4 iterations of the PlayStation. I've played games on all of them. Obviously that's like a huge, that's why I'm a nerd. I love the PlayStation. I do want to get a PC in the future, but I got that so I could play these games that would kind of like in real time, right? Like you're witnessing like the development and the evolution of something that I love, video games. Now, why is it that now all of a sudden we find ourselves with games that are coming out that aren't even polished and finished, so it doesn't showcase the technology as well, right? And specifically, I'm alluding to Cyberpunk 2077 from CD Projekt Red, the developer CD Projekt Red. One of the most beloved developers in all of gaming, by the way, because of the fact that they came out with that dime piece of a game, that fucking smoke show of a game, Witcher 3. Wild Hunt, right? Mike got me on that shit, so thank you, Mike. But that game from a narrative standpoint, narrative perspective, performance perspective, specs perspective, all that shit was amazing. I don't think as an RPG, that game was absolutely stunning to play and go through, right? And now, if you happen to find yourself, right, if you're in the situation where you watch The Witcher, like you came across, you happen to play video games and you came across The Witcher on Netflix and that was your first introduction to that world, like that creative world, you need to do yourself a service and go, if you have, obviously, like a PlayStation 4 or a PS5 because it's backwards compatible, or an Xbox or whatever the fuck, PC2, go do yourself a favor and play Witcher 3 The Wild Hunt. Obviously, there's other Witchers because it's the third installment in the gaming franchise, and I believe CD Projekt Red made the rest of them, but this was, the third one was, as I have seen, is ubiquitously considered to be the best installment of that franchise, that gaming franchise. So that just exponentially propelled this developer, which I think was an indie studio before, like way back in the day, CD Projekt Red, into like being this AAA action, AAA game developer. Like now they got the big bucks. They got fucking bankroll. They got production value. Because now what can they do? Because they've made so much money and are like, their reputation is so amazing. They could go and make these games that like really push the boundaries and like just fucking blow our socks off, right? So what do? They announce Cyberpunk 2077. And the marketing team on that fucking game, they have to win an award because there's a fine balance to all this shit, like in terms of marketing. My day job happens to be in marketing, so I know a little bit about this, but you don't want to fucking lie about the product. Obviously, you don't even have to be in marketing to know that. You don't want to straight up just lie about the product where you say it does a certain thing or you say it is a certain thing, and then when you buy it, you're like, well, this was a fucking like a scam. I just got gypped however amount of money because it's not what I paid for, right? And that marketing team, they kind of did that. They overpromised, and then the studio underdelivered. I don't know if they outsourced their marketing, but I would be really pissed if I was CD Projekt Red. And basically, why do I say that? Cyberpunk 2077 was promised to be narratively something different from what we've ever seen before, right? And from a game mechanics perspective, it was going to be such an in-depth world where each gamer had unique interactions with certain characters. The depth of choice and decision making in terms of like decision trees you could go down within the story would change certain elements of the narrative later on. That's something that we've seen done before, but this game promised to have the scope of those small elements just be vastly different from what we've seen. Like insanely more fleshed out, fully developed, just like a really solid game, right? That's how they marketed it. I saw the fucking trailers. I was hype as fuck. I'm sitting there like with a hard on watching CD Projekt Red's like announcement of fucking Cyberpunk, and I'm like, this game was supposed to be the fucking bee's knees. Like this shit was gonna be insane, off the wall, fucking from every aspect of gaming. This shit was supposed to be like amazing, right? And I didn't buy it, thankfully, because my hardware at the time was a PS4. I'm pointing off screen because my PlayStation 5 is over there for reference, but the console I had at the time was a PS4. I didn't have a PC, so my specs, my hardware at the time couldn't keep up with the graphics and all that shit for me to actually fully enjoy the game. And I had seen online initially the feedback from the community was that the PS4 version of Cyberpunk was dog shit. So I'm thinking in my head, okay, fine. Don't get Cyberpunk because you don't have a PC, you have a PS4, and you don't have a PS5, right? So why would you get something if your device can't keep up with it? I get that. So that's what I did. I didn't get it. Then fast forward like a couple weeks later, I look online and this game is getting absolutely shitted on because of the fact that it was half-baked. It was incomplete, right? And this touches back on everything. Like you've seen this happen so many times. I talked about this with Battlefront fucking 2042. I talked about this. Is it 2040? What, 2099? Whatever. The new Battlefield that I talked about in one of my other podcasts. That game was half-baked too. Caldera, it was not half-baked, but it was like sort of not really, like it wasn't polished off to a T, right? Like they're releasing things that have problems with them. Why? I think it's because of the fact that now with advancements in technology, this is my working hypothesis, and I sound like a fucking I sound like a conspiracy theorist when I say this, but the reason I think this is because with the advancements in technology, now games are not just like copies of a certain like code or hard code that you put on a disc and you ship out. And then it's from there, it's like you have to make sure that that final product is finished because it's physical. Like you can't change it once you give it out already, right? You have to make sure it's completely polished off. Now with technology and things like software updates, game updates, if they have a little fuck up, they don't have to invest it. Like they just make it, they announce it, people are getting hyped, they buy it in pre-orders, you make a shit ton of money, you send it out, they get the game, and you've done like a once over on it, right? As a developer, you've just been like, all right, yeah, this thing looks good to go. And then you give it to the community, and obviously, when you give it to someone like gamers, nerds, geeks who fucking play this thing day in and day out, and they see like these little bugs and kinks and chinks in the armor, they're obviously gonna find what's wrong with the game. So what do you as a developer? What can you do? You're just like, oh, fine, send out a patch, an update. Now you can do that. Nowadays you can do that, right? You're afforded that like slack, that leeway in releasing a product that's not completely finished, right? Obviously at the cost of your reputation, right? So you go and do that, you send it out, and you as the gamer are like, what the fuck is this? Then they update it, then you're like, okay, fix that issue, but now you find another issue, right? That's the ongoing like discourse between the community of gamers and the respective developers who release certain projects or whatever it is, right? I find that to be pretty troubling because why would, like, it speaks badly to the art form. Like video games as a creative, as an outlet for storytelling, I think I happen to be a huge fan of it. Like I didn't get into Star Wars, which now I'm a huge fan of it, obviously, as you could see from the pullover. And actually, funny enough, I'm wearing the t-shirt under it is a Mandalorian t-shirt. Shit, sorry, my chain. But yeah, obviously, I didn't get into Star Wars beforehand. For those who's watching, I don't know if you can see that. Whatever, it says Bounty Hunter. I don't want to waste your time. But for me, I didn't get into Star Wars until I played Jedi Fallen Order or Star Wars Fallen Order, Jedi Fallen Order, some shit like that. I can't remember the name of the game, but it was by EA, funny enough, who I've like shitted on before. Taking a fat dookie on them as a developer, but they did an amazing job with that game. And from a narrative perspective, it really got me to like love the lore and the world of Star Wars. And then from there, I actually ended up watching all of the movies as they were, or no, in chronological order. So I started off with 1, 2, and 3, then 4, 5, 6, and then obviously I'm up to date with like the 7, 8, 9, or and even all the spin-offs like Han Solo and all that shit. So they were definitely great. I love the movies, but that element of being able to tell a story as a character you yourself like play in as, being able to tell the story with you, the audience member, also being a player, a character within the narrative is a beautiful thing. Now, this problem of developers releasing unfinished games and just given the leeway to just be like, oh yeah, we didn't really pay attention to that, like here's the update to fix that, is fucked up because it's like disgraceful to the art form. That's my opinion on that, right? Like I really do think that's a messed up thing because they're basically telling us this. When they do that, the developers, I feel like it's basically saying this to us, the gaming community, right? They're giving you something that you love because you're willing to pay money for it, right? From a business perspective, that makes a lot of sense. So they go, all right, you're hype about this game. We see the pre-orders are going through the roof. We got to get this thing out there as quick as possible so we can make a boatload of fucking money. So that's their view on this. They don't think about it from a fucking lover of the art form perspective. So that's why they just give it to us. They throw it in our face. And what you see is you get a product that you're like, this was ass. And now you're just left with a stale face. And your impression of the developer, at least for me, it completely changes. CD Projekt Red, I don't really think that they go and, I think it's like you have to, I don't think that's a habit of theirs because I do think because of the fact that in the early days they weren't a huge studio and they made these amazing games, it was a labor of love for them. So that's why you get that product, that quality of product in like a game like Witcher 3. I think for this is the increase in bankroll kind of got to like, whatever the heads of that company, it got to the leaders in the leaders' heads at that company. and they kind of just had a pressure to kind of perform and live up to a standard, and they might have bit off more than they could chew. I haven't played the game yet, so I'll give you guys an official review of that once the fucking PS5 version comes out, which I think is scheduled for Q1 of 2022. But obviously that game, if you've been keeping up with what's going on with their schedule, they've pushed back the release of that game notoriously, which is another thing too. Like CD Projekt Red initially announced that game to come out in September of, I think, 2020, and then they pushed it back. Then they pushed it back, and then they pushed it back. So why push back that date if you still release like something that's not even as good? Why wouldn't you just continue pushing it back for the fear to lose money? You already did that when you falsely promised on a delivery date and then you couldn't live up to that date. People are already like bummed out, and you keep pushing it back. At least redeem yourself and give the audience a fucking like experience that's worth the wait. Like, but if you give them like some shit that like, yeah, you're gonna have to give us a little longer, 5 more seconds, and then you give us that, it's like, well, what the fuck? Well, give them that because I haven't played it yet, but I digress. Yeah, so that's like my take on that, right? And it's just really, it bothers me because I want to see video games do better. I think video games are taken more seriously, right? But I think the developers, whoever's running these companies, I don't think they're huge gamers themselves. I think a lot of these people are making business decisions. So now I think you're going to see a lot of reform within the gaming industry. Not just from that perspective, I hope in that perspective, but you see now like huge developers like Rockstar, they're getting audited, or not audited, but they're getting like looked at kind of, they have a negative reputation because of the fact that all these developers and employees are being pushed to their like fucking limit in terms of working hours because there's like so much pressure for them to just get this thing out, right? Why not? And I get video games take forever to make, longer than movies actually, right? Like, because it's such a labor of love. Games, really great games with a lot of like depth to them, usually take a couple years to make, like upwards of 3 years. Sometimes even like if you spend a lot of time on them, you've seen games in franchises take gaps of like fucking 9 years even to get that product out the door. So I think that's the right move. I think you should still stick with that. Obviously, from a production standpoint, you want to get it out as quick as possible, but don't make it at the cost of like the quality of the game. Like, why would you do that? I don't understand that. I think that's the wrong way to go. I think going forward, the backlash on these companies that start doing this shit where they release a half-baked game is going to be huge. Like, we're going to get fed up eventually, and you already see people are getting like slandered, and now, unfortunately, at the expense of industry giants like CD Projekt Red, when they do the shit that they do and release a game that's not completely polished, people are going to give their minds on social media like Twitter and stuff like that, like me on this little freaking small podcast, but people are going to eventually put their voices out there, and then your reputation is just going to go down the shitter. What you should do is, take a little more time, make sure it's fully fleshed, and avoid being like a developer like EA, who has completely disgraced themselves because they've done something and released some shit that's like trash, like Battlefield. So yeah, I don't know. That's what I see right now, and that's what I'm bothered by. Another thing too, fuck Microsoft for buying Bethesda, and now fucking my favorite game franchise of all time, Elder Scrolls, is now limited to PC and Xbox. Now I'm going to have to fucking buy a whole PC just to play one fucking game. Ideally, I have enough money to buy a really good gaming setup from, I don't know, something like maybe this podcast or my job as my career progresses right now, my day job or whatever it is, right? Ideally, I'll have enough fucking money saved up where I could afford to buy a really nice gaming setup, like a PC setup, to play that fucking game. Because now my beautiful PS5 is not going to be able to play the one game that I was looking forward to. I think I have like 4 years to do that. I think right now it's rumored that it comes out in 2024, but I would not be surprised if it's pushed back because I think Bethesda now seeing shit like Cyberpunk, hopefully the people at that company kind of take their heads out of their asses and Microsoft doesn't, impose too much pressure on them, and they could take their time and make sure that they perfectly polish this beautiful little thing that they give to us to fucking fap to for years to come. Because that's what I still do with Skyrim, and that's what Mike does with Skyrim, and that's what all real gaming stands do with their most beloved projects or creatives or games. Yeah. I need to find other words to use for games because I've said that if you play a game, watch this back, take a shot every time I say game, and you're gonna be in the ER getting your stomach pumped of full of charcoal or coal to soak up that, because you're gonna be fucked up. I said it way too much, so I'm trying to think of like other words to say for that. It's hard to come up with it on the go. But yeah, that was today's episode. Once again, guys, thank you so much for subscribing. If you come across this channel and you like the content, please give me feedback, give me criticism, honestly. Just say what you want to say, obviously to a certain extent. Don't be assholes to each other or me or whatever. But yeah, just give me feedback, give me criticism, useful at that. And hopefully if you guys, follow me on TikTok, follow me on Instagram. All my socials are somewhere linked on other platforms. But yeah, just follow it, and it comes out, like I said, CWC, a new episode every single Monday. You can catch a new episode. I'm going to try to stick as hard as I can to that production schedule. We'll see who comes on here. And yeah, I can't believe that those fucking TikTok videos blew up. A lot more dating stories and, all that stuff to come. Just funny stories. I'm not like a huge player or anything, but I'll share any like little funny dating mishaps that I've had, because I've had some of them on here. If the conversation is right. But for today's episode, since it was just me, I spoke about movies and games and shit. So hopefully you liked it. Yeah, you could see it on Spotify, YouTube, and obviously now TikTok for the clips. Thank you so much for watching. Oh wait, sorry. Cue the outro music. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, peace.